Welcome to today's setup tutorial for Panagenda Application Insights. My name is Franz Walder. I'm Product Manager at Panagenda for the Analytics Solutions portfolio. Today I will guide you through a couple of steps that are required when setting up the Application Insights appliance. We're going to start with deploying the actual virtual appliance in 3 different systems. Then we're going to continue setting up the virtual appliance, setting time zone settings, network settings, so the basic setup that's required to run the virtual machine. And we will conclude with the initial application setup. We're going to configure the application so it collects everything that is required for continuous operation. We start out with deploying the virtual appliance, and we will do that in VMware vSphere, Microsoft Hyper-V, and VMWare Workstation. VMware vSphere is the recommended virtualization platform for production environments, whereas VMware Workstation is really only recommended for trial installation and evals. Regardless of that, we will show how to install on all 3 of these platforms. I'm here at the login screen of my VMware vCenter console, and I'm going to log into my system. And as you can see here, this is just a test system that we're using to deploy this appliance. I click here on Virtual Machines and subsequently on Register VM. The virtual machine that we will be deploying is provided by Panagenda as an OVA file. You download this from our website and then select it here. So select OVF OVA, hit Next. We'll select the OVA by clicking here on this Select Files field, and I have prepared everything here that I need. As you can see here, this is the Application Insights OVA file that I select. Let's also give this a name. Let's call it Panagenda Application Insights. I hit Next, and now I'm presented with a selection of which disk store I want to deploy this on. I will take the first one here. As the next step, I have to accept the end user license agreement, which I will do. I select the VMware network that I will be using. And very important here, please select disk provisioning as thick. That will give the maximum performance for the appliance, and power on automatically is not required in this case. Also, a few words in regards to the disks that we will be using. It is highly recommended that you give a fast disk subsystem to Application Insights. In some processing, especially the nightly processing of all the source code that is collected, it is very beneficial if there is a fast disk subsystem underneath. And again, also the thick disk provisioning is quite important. After all that is complete, I get a quick information here about the settings that I've made, and that's about it. From here on out, the system is going to deploy my virtual appliance, and once that is done, we will be jumping into the appliance and configure the disk. Just enlarge it by a few megabytes, or actually add a separate disk to that, so that we can later on in this tutorial also take this physically enlarged disk and enlarge the partition inside the operating system so the changes reflect to what we see. Once the deployment process is done, we're going to select this newly deployed virtual appliance and edit its settings. This is where we modify the virtual hardware. In our case, we just want to add an additional disk to the system to have a basis to later on show how the enlargement of the disks in the virtual appliance itself works. But this is also important when you're deploying the system, especially for production, but also for test environments. It's quite important that the system has enough memory and also enough hard disk space. I would ask you to consult the ApplicationInsights Setup guide, which is available on panagenda.com. there's calculations and there's a table about what size of resources are appropriate for what kind of environment or what size of environment. Please consult this guide before you set up your appliance. That will lead to the best results during your evaluation. So in our case, we just want to add a very simple hard disk here. Let's say, let's just make that 10 gigabytes, just to see it later on we have something added, and I save it. That concludes the install of vSphere. We will now move on to Hyper-V and finish up with the VMware Workstation. Now we've entered a new machine here where I have my Hyper-V installed. I've already opened the Hyper-V Manager, and from the Hyper-V Manager I'm going to import a new virtual machine. This new virtual machine, again, is a file that is being downloaded from panagenda.com, and it comes as a 7-zip file, and I've already unpacked this in preparation. So when I say locate the folder of my disk, I've prepared a folder here on desktop that says AI VMX deployment, and in there I have unpacked my panagenda application insights files that have been extracted from this 7-zip file. So I can, as you can see here, this is the folder that holds snapshots, virtual disks, and virtual machines. And that's the folder I want to pick, Application Insights. Click Next. It says here, when was this machine built and what's the name. I can choose here if I want to import this as a new ID. I would recommend, if you're doing a test deployment, just copy the virtual machine so it creates a new unique ID. And again, I get a quick summary where I could choose where I want to store my disks, where I want to store my configuration, etc. And all I need to do here is really say where do I want to put this, where I want to import this. Again, when it comes to the disk, please keep in mind to choose a folder that has a good speed, so the disks have a good speed underneath, because especially during the nightly processing of all the source code, etc., will be very helpful for runtimes. I get a summary here again, what I've chosen, my configuration options, and I just click on Finish, and the process is quite similar to what we've just seen in vSphere. It now deploys the appliance, puts everything in the right spots, and once that is done, we're going to take a look at the appliance, edit it, and add a new hard disk file so we can enlarge that later on in the tutorial. Once the process is done, we right-click this machine here and say we want to edit the settings. Please also keep in mind here, please consult the Application Insights Setup guide on panagenda.com. It will give information about sizing, about the appropriate amount of memory and disk size, etc. That will fit your environment and the size of users and applications that you have. We want to add an additional hard drive now, so we can extend that later on. Let's do a new hard disk. Let's just make a VHD here and dynamically expanding, let's say. Let's call it my AI extension disk, and let's give it a size of, again, 10 gigabytes. That done, I have now 2 disks here, and I will use those later on during the disk expansion. From here on out, I can just power on the virtual machine and start working with it. This concludes the couple of steps that are required to deploy Application Insights in vSphere. We will now move on to VMware Workstation. Our last option to deploy panagenda Application Insights is VMware Workstation, mainly used for trial and eval purposes. And what I've prepared is I've extracted a 7-zip file that holds the VMX and the disk files, and I've extracted it again to a folder, and I simply click open here, select this folder, again my AI VMX deployment folder, and select my VMX file that is in that folder. That will open the pre-configured workstation type virtual appliance. Here again I can go into edit virtual machine settings. Also in this area here, it's important to understand that the resources required by the appliance are dependent on the size of your environment. And please go to panagenda.com and look at the Application Insights Setup Guide for guidance on how much resources should be allocated to this virtual appliance. I also want to show you here how to add a new disk so we can enlarge disk space in the virtual appliance later on. Click on Add here and add a hard disk. Follow the recommendation here to make it a SCSI disk. Create a new virtual appliance or a new virtual disk. Again, make it 10 gigabytes and store it as a single disk file. Give it a name, and yeah, that's about it. I just hit OK here and I'm done. We will continue this tutorial with the chapter Virtual Appliance Configuration. In this chapter we're going to use the VMWare Workstation appliance to show you how the VMware started, basic operations inside the VM, setting up network, time zone, and also expanding the disk space based on those disks we have added earlier on in this tutorial. I'm back at my VMware Workstation here with my ApplicationInsights appliance that we have just deployed. We're going to use this appliance for this next chapter of the tutorial. I'm simply going to power on the virtual machine, and it warns me here that I have no CD-ROM drive attached, and I'm going to tell him it should not connect this device every time I log in. It takes a couple of seconds for the appliance to start up after the kernel has been selected. And once the virtual machine has started, I am greeted with a prompt that tells me what the current IP address of the virtual appliance is. You will find this prompt throughout all the different forms that we've deployed the appliance in. So either in vSphere, in Hyper-V, or in Workstation, the prompt will be just the same. And I log in here with the default credentials of username root and the password config. Once I'm in this interface here, in the text interface, I get a quick overview about the current system status, if all the services that are required are running, and what the disk space is for my different partitions that are important for me. To make things a little bit easier when setting up the appliance, there is an optional graphical user interface provided. For resource consumption reasons, that's not started per default, but I can do so with typing here Start X. Once I'm in the user interface, a couple of icons here on the desktop show me different options of what I can do. And let's start with the host information, which lets me set the name of this virtual appliance, so the host name of the appliance. I will just call it AI Test Appliance. Something that's also possible here in the UI is editing the keyboard. Currently there's 2 default keyboards here available, German and US English, but additional ones can be added. Once the host name is set, the next part is typically the network configuration. I click here on Network Connections, and this is where I have my Ethernet connection. ApplicationInsights uses Docker as the system to run all the applications that are required to provide the services. And it might happen in here that you see numerous network connections here, especially under bridge, etc. But those are those are not to be interfered with really by the user, because they're really the connections that Docker requires to run its own internal processes. The one Ethernet connection, the wired connection here, is really the one that we need to be concerned about. So I select this connection, click Edit, and now I have all the abilities to configure whatever settings I need for my IP environment. My IP address here is right now received by DHCP, which is fine for our trial, but I quickly want to show you what is possible here. And for most situations, really, a manual IP address is likely going to be required. So I switch to manual here and just add an IP address here. Give it a net mask, and also give it a gateway. The net mask 24, by the way, is equivalent to 255.255.255.0. For other net masks, please consult the internet for the respective short forms here. I can also select DNS servers here. I'm just going to enter an example here, and for search domains, they also have to be entered here, and that will be, for example, if I want to add 2 search domains, that would be, for example, acme.com and then space acmedev.com. And that's really all that is required for IP address configuration. I can click Save here, and that will store my configuration. In this case, I want to keep my DHCP addresses so we can later on access this virtual appliance. Another important part is configuring date and time to your local environment. Certain processes in Application Insights run during night times that calculate, for example, certain things within the source code that is collected, or calculate usage aggregates, etc. And it's important that the appliance is in a correct time zone, so these nightly applications actually run during the night and not during a period where a lot of user activity might occur. So I hit date and time here, and that lets me select my time zone, also my time format, and I also can enable here the automatic time zone checking. Now, during our setup of the 3 appliances, we added another disk to our system, so we can enlarge the disk space that is available to our appliance, and that is especially important when there's larger systems involved. So I want to go here and open a terminal window and show you with, actually, let's enlarge that a little bit so we can see it better. So as you can see here, this disk is the one that we are really concerned about. So this is the disk we basically want to enlarge, which currently has a size of 60 gigabytes. And the first thing we need to do to enlarge the disk is open gparted here and add a new partition to this newly created disk that we have just added. I select my disk here up top. Then I create, well, actually, first of all, I need to create a partition table. I'm just going to use an MS-DOS partition table here. Create a new primary partition, which will be of the file system LVM2 PV. It's just supposed to use the maximum size available, really. I can add that and apply my changes. It warns me here that once I apply this, all data on the disk will be lost, since we're adding a new partition and reformatting basically, but that is quite alright for our purposes here. So now I have a new partition here created, and I'm going to format that to LVM2 PV again, and also accept that. So now we have set up the virtual partition that is required to make this available to the operating system. Now we need to add this new disk space to the logical volumes, and to do that I have clicked here on logical volume management, and as you can see here there's unallocated volumes here that are available. Now we'll add these volumes to our logical volumes here, and as you can see, here's opt panagenda PG data, the same really that we marked down here as the one that we wanted to enlarge with 60 gigabytes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these unallocated volumes. I'm going to add them to an existing volume group, and I will pick the volume group CL-pen. Now, jumping in to this logical volume of panagenda PG data, I'm going to edit its properties, and you can see here I have now 10 gigabytes more of disk space available, and I will assign that to this logical volume. I'll leave all the other settings here unaffected, just expand the disk space and hit OK. Now everything should be done. We can check that by entering RDF again, which now shows me 70 gigabytes of free disk space. That concludes this chapter. We will continue with our third and final chapter in this tutorial, Initial Application Setup. In this chapter, we will first connect to the application via web browser, upload license and notes ID, discover the Domino servers in our environment, and then configure the content package as basically assign servers to be collected and inspected by ApplicationInsights. In order to connect to the virtual appliance, we need an IP address or a host name, and the easiest way to get that is the console of the virtual appliance. As we've seen earlier at the login screen here, we see the IP address, and we will use that IP address to connect to our system. This is probably also the information you will be getting if your internal IT sets this system up for you, and it's really also the only thing that you need. Once we're starting to configure, there is no need to go back to these previous steps to do any configurations in the Linux interface. From here on out, everything is done in the web browser. We now take this IP address and enter it in a web browser to connect to the virtual appliance. Panagenda recommends Firefox or Chrome during the initial setup and also during the continuous operation and working with ApplicationInsights. When I first connect to the site, I get an information that my certificate authority is invalid. That is simply because the appliance uses a self-certified certificate simply to make sure that all information runs over HTTPS and the connection is secure. Of course, you are free to exchange these certificates with properly certified certificates that are recognized in your environment. In my case, I'm just going to proceed to the site and am prompted with my first welcome screen here. The first thing I see here is that it will need a couple of steps for the appliance to show me something, and the first step that I need to complete is configuring the system and setting up the notes ID and license. To do that, I log into the admin client here, and I use the username config with the password config. Immediately I'm redirected to a screen where I have to upload my license, and I've also prepared this here in my deployment folder, and I just select my Acme license here, agree to the terms and conditions, and upload my license. It tells me here that my license is valid, and so I can go back here and come to this overview screen. On this overview screen, I can do a couple of things. I can go into Discovery. I see the content packages that are available to me, enabled by the license. But the first thing I want to do is set up the user ID. So this is where I upload the notes ID file, that needs access to all the servers and subcomponents that I need to work with Application Insights. Please also refer to the Application Insights Setup Guide, which can be downloaded on panagenda.com for all the required access for this Notes ID. There's a couple of different things that need to be in place before Application Insights can live up to its full potential. So please consult with the guide and see what all is required for the Notes ID. I simply browse for my Notes ID, select my ID file here, and enter my password. The upload was successful, and if it's successful, I should also see here the username of the ID file that has been uploaded and when it has been uploaded. From here, I can continue to the server discovery. The easiest way to discover your servers is enter a server hostname here as a start server for the discovery. An additional option is adding new servers manually. In the bottom field here, where you just add again a host name here, please not the domino name, but the host name, potentially also important full qualified host name in this field here. In the perfect scenario, you even only need the common name here. That requires a very good DNS solution to be configured in the virtual appliance. If you have access to the virtual appliance, an easy way to test this is go to the virtual appliance, log in here, again with root and config, and then just ping the server that should be your start server. In my example, I want to ping the server. I want to start with the server Jalen, so I want to ping here, ping Jalen. As you see, this is just a common name, and it automatically resolves the server for me and comes back with a ping. That is a very good sign, because I know during my discovery, when I also try to connect to all the other servers, there's a good chance the name resolution will work better than if I have to enter the full qualified host name here. Let me switch back to my browser here and add my server Jalen here and click Start Discovery. What's going to happen now is the system in the background connects to the server, goes through the names and address book, finds out all the servers in the names and address book, and tries to connect to all these servers. During this process, also a simple connection and an access scan is being done. And as you can see here, I'm here at my Domino server list, where I get information which servers have been discovered and what access do I have to these servers. So I get information about the basic access to name and address book, access to the log files, access to catalog, access to statistics on a server, access to the DOMlog database, and the right to execute console commands on the server. This information is very helpful, since many of these areas are required when we're collecting this information, but I will be talking about that a little bit later on when we configure the config packages. Just in case there are problems with connecting to these servers, there is an additional option here at the bottom that says Check Server Access, and this opens a more advanced interface that also allows me to carry out an advanced check here. So I'm going to mark all my servers, and I'm going to perform an extended access check to these servers. That will give back information about, for example, about information about Notes INI configuration, information that goes a little bit beyond this simple test that is made during discovery. When troubleshooting, this is the area you want to go and find out if all the settings are correctly and properly set in your environment, or not even in the environment, but really based for the Notes ID. Does the Notes ID have the rights to do what it's supposed to do? Once we're done with server discovery, we can switch back to the main screen either by clicking Content Packages up here or using the Back button. And as you can see now, I have discovered 33 servers in my environment, and I'm now going to assign collection tasks to these servers. Let's start with the server basics. Here we collect server documents, connection documents, statistics, and node INI values in different intervals from those servers. So I click on Configure here, and one thing that makes it a little bit easier for me to do that is this button here that says Only Show Accessible Servers. That will filter my servers down to the servers that I can actually access, and now I can click Add All here, and of those 33 servers, only 17 are accessible, so I add these to my list. In the catalog configuration package, the inventory of the nodes databases are basically collected. I'm collecting to the catalog NSF here. I'm also taking information out of log NSF, but I'm also talking to the server directory internally, so being the list of databases that shows up when you do an open database or a database open in the nodes client. So again, I click Configure here, and I could do the same thing that I did earlier, but what I want to do here is use this Copy Settings option and copy my servers from the Domino Server Basics config package. The third part is session activity. In this content package, we collect the activities of all the users from the log NSF files. So in order to get this information, we need to access the log NSF and the individual user information. Again, I'm going to copy settings from the Domino Server Basics, and it shows me 17 servers here, and I can save and close that. The next content package is the directory NAB content. So this is the information that's gathered from the nodes names and address book, person document, group documents, mailing databases. Again, I hit Configure here, and a little bit different to all the other content packages, here I only need one server. So what I'm going to do is, again, look for my start server here and add that to the list. What you would usually do here is add one server per domain. Or if one server has all the server documents in their names and address book, one server will do. But usually, when the names and address books are split, one server for each address book or domain here. It's also possible to collect all names and address books in this case, but usually just the names NSF will be all that is required for a normal analysis. Click Apply here and save and close this. The final content package is the Domino weblog, which enables collection of the DOMLOG NSF database. And in here I have this button again, only show accessible servers. Just this time it's going to filter for servers where the DOMLOG NSF is accessible. And that's going to be a little bit of a different list. Again, I'm clicking the button here and say Add All Servers. And as you can see here, only 9 servers have DOMLOG enabled in my environment. I hit Save and Close, and that is basically the basic setup done now. Everything is collecting, and I'm ready for the appliance to proceed and do its work. With these steps, the setup is finished, and I can return here to the starting screen that we had, either via portal or just going back to the IP address. And you will see here I get the screen check mark that says that the system setup and the scope definition is done. And now I have to go through a couple of steps before I can actually log into ApplicationInsights and see my first results. In the first step, the system is going to establish a usage data collection. So it's going to start collecting data from the servers. It's going to collect the names and address book information. It's going to collect the catalog information from the servers to establish a baseline of which databases are used and are not so much used. Once that is done, and this can take up to a day or even 2 days, depending on the timing really. But if it's set up before 6:30 in the afternoon, it will take 1 day, and the system will advance to the second part, to the data analysis part. This is where, for the first time, the collected usage data is split up and analyzed in a way that we're trying to figure out which are the databases that are most used, figuring out things like which department uses the databases, in which way are the databases used, and depending on that, we determine for which databases the design is being collected. Now, once the process is finished, the design collection for the notes databases starts. And that again can also take up to 1 or 2 days. So it can take 2 to 3 days to enter this continuous operation box here, which then will forward you to the login of Application Insights. Since our appliance cannot go there just yet, let me connect to one of our demo appliances and show you basically how the login looks and what you will see when you first enter the appliance. We will be greeted by the login screen here, and again I can enter with the default credentials config and config. And I will then start to see my dashboard here, giving me information about how much focus databases have been identified, how much databases have been identified overall, and what the status of my design scan is. As you can see here in my demo system, I have design information for all my focus databases, but during the first couple of days when the appliance starts running, this number will slowly rise as the days pass, and the first design collection is really being established. This concludes our tutorial for today. I thank you very much for your attention, and I hope this helps you with setting up Application Insights and gives you a good start in working with the solution.